Hi everyone, I'm back with another new guest, Christy. Hi Christy, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm fantastic. How are you today?
I'm doing good, Christy. Thank you for asking. So I'm absolutely glad to have you as my next guest. We are elated, right? I'll quickly give a quick introduction about Christy. I might not do a very good job, but Christy is, collaborative enough to correct my mistakes and correct things I don't talk about. So I hope so. So Christy is the Chief Lending Officer of UFCU, based out of Austin, having 25 years of experience across mortgage and banking industry. I mean, she's a true blue banking ecosystem expert, I would say, right? She has spent like 25 years. She has deep knowledge of analytics, strategic planning, sales enablement, and digital innovation, right? So it completes almost the entire circle. One very interesting thing about Christy is she has deep interest in M&A, right, and has led multiple billion-dollar acquisitions. So that's a niche which Christy has apart from her day job. So she also sits on on a bunch of boards. She sits on the boards of Trade and Alcon while serving on Westborg for MBA and on the credit union advisory board for Freddie Mac. So it's pretty difficult to find Christy not working. So firstly, I'm thankful enough, Christy, that have given us, an our time today. So thanks about that. Please feel free to include anything which I might have missed. Obviously, please go ahead.
Well, you're very kind, and that was a very kind and generous introduction. I hate talking about myself, and I feel like everything that I want to do is to give back to others and do the best that I can to be a good not only corporate citizen but community citizen. And I appreciate your having me on to talk about.
Absolutely pleasure, Christy. I mean, this is an absolute pleasure for us to host you today, right? Uh, one question I want to start with, right? Since you do a bunch of things, you're a CLO, you have deep interest in M&As, you serve on a bunch of boards, right? So it's like uh, juggling multiple hats together. So what keeps you going? I mean, it's like you've got decades of experience. So what kept you going and what still keeps you going every single day?
When I think about my why, it's really all about the impact that I get to have. And from an early point in my career, I have always been involved with helping people purchase their homes. And the impact that that has on a family's life,
That's
you
huge.
just can't overestimate, because the stability of being able to come home and hang up your own pictures and have your stuff in the fridge, and it's so much different than when you rent. And I was reminded of that when I moved to Austin. I ended up renting for about the first half of the year before I was able to find my home. And it was a great reminder of just what the difference is between renting and owning, even when it's a choice. That
Yep.
ownership feels different. And then when you compound that with, hey, you get to build generational wealth. You get to have something that is, generally speaking, safer and better in terms of an investment. It, when we think about the rest of lending, all types of loans really impact people's lives with their ability to have a car to be able to get to work, and
Yep.
their ability to be able to spend extra time with their family because they're not having to wait on the bus, or that interim loan that allows them to handle a crisis that comes up that they just weren't financially prepared for. And so that's what I get to do every day. And that's what keeps me coming back and gets me literally so excited. I'm like a kid with my hand in the cookie jar because of what I get to do every day.
Absolutely. I think it's more of enabling a family to get their first home. So that's something huge, right? I mean, I don't have my first home yet. I haven't bought my first home. So I know whom to contact now to help me get my first home. So this is, amazing. And that has a huge, I would say, impact on society, what you do, right? I mean, this is not just sitting in your cubicle and doing something else. This is amazing. I mean, I wish that I had the ability to do similar kind of roles, which actually impacts the society. Right? This is amazing. Uh, Now, Christy, I mean, since you have like what 25 years of experience, right, leading multiple teams across the board, right? Now, definitely, all leaders that I speak to, right, do have some specific philosophies and leadership styles, which everyone is unique to, right? So if you want to, I mean, do you want to talk about any specific leadership style, Christy, that you have, right? And if there's any philosophy that guides you across your leadership journey throughout the last 25 years?
I think there are two things that I would tell you that I would just characterize as who I am as a person, and that comes across in who I show up as an employee, who I show up as a teammate, and how I show up as a leader. And the first is curiosity and learning. I've always wanted to learn the next thing, be involved and understand, like, why does something work this way? How do we improve it and make it better? How do we reduce the friction?
Yeah.
My dad's an engineer, and I grew up being able to ask those questions and he taking the time to really explain the intricacies of something. Now, when you wanted a quick answer, that was not the way to go. But I watched my dad explain to my nephew, who's 4, explaining to him how to build something or why the water faucet works the way it does, and just sparking that natural curiosity. And as we continue to grow, if you're going to grow, you have to have that curiosity to continue to grow. And the other thing is being the cheerleader. You probably would have never guessed that I was a cheerleader in my younger days, but it continues on. It is I want to be the person on the sidelines encouraging you to achieve the most that you can do. It's not about telling people what to do. I mean, to me, that is the least impactful part of leadership. It is how do you come alongside somebody and encourage them to achieve more than they ever thought possible, to empower them to do something that they didn't think they were going to be allowed to do. So that's really what I would characterize as kind of the two main things that drive me.
That's pretty interesting, Christy. I mean, I can sort of relate to it. I myself being an engineer, so I can just understand exactly why you look forward to your dad and having these logical explanations. Absolutely. Now, obviously, guiding principles is something very important, but also across these many years, you might have faced a lot of challenges, right? I mean, still in today's world, it's not easy to become a C-level being a female, quote unquote, right? It's not easy. I mean, the financial services ecosystem is still, at some point of time, male dominated, right? So, you want to talk about a few challenges that you face across those years, because I mean, every single podcast I want to cover them so that I can inspire aspiring, female leaders to reach to the next level, right? So if you can share a few challenges, people can may benefit a lot from that.
I think a lot of times we only want to talk about the highlights, and talking about some of the lowlights really gives people insight into, this is kind of normal. This is what happens, or this is what you can expect to be prepared for. I can remember going to one of my first national conferences. And this is a bit of an over-exaggeration, but we'll illustrate the point. The conference had about 10,000 attendees, and I'm pretty sure 9,997 of them were white men. And just to say it wasn't a very diverse crowd. I was often, in fact, I could only ever remember being the only woman at a dinner table, right? You go to a dinner, it's a 10 top, there'd be 9 guys and me.
Yep.
And my boss, who I had a great relationship with, looked at me one night at dinner and he said, "Why are you so quiet? This is not who you normally are." And it's like, I don't know who the latest basketball team is or the baseball team or any of these things that you guys are talking about. I don't fit in. This not the same level of conversation. And so it can be very hard to engage. It's easy to feel that you don't belong when everything is very different. And this applies not only to women, but it applies to many types of, minorities. When you're the only one, it's easy to be a little bit left out, or to feel like you are being left out, even when people are trying. So I'd say that was one of the hardest things to do, is just continue to show up when you feel uncomfortable, when you don't know what to do or say. And I was so appreciative of people who taught me things about basketball so that I could learn how to do the Final Four and the brackets and all the things. And I did better than I expected, considering I picked based on random, that one looks good. I wasn't even picking by color or mascot. It was just like, I think this one will win. I got a 50-50 shot if we get there. But learning and understanding and being able to talk about that,
Yeah.
it's not all on one person to do the reaching out. I've been
Yep.
lucky enough in my life to have a number of mentors, and I tell people that come to me and say, "Hey, I'm looking for a mentor. Can you help me? Can you be my mentor? Can you connect me with somebody?" That there's work that has to be done by the person who wants to be mentored, right? You've got to do some research and figure out what you want and do the hard work of showing up with good questions.
Yeah. Definitely.
And so when we talk about different situations, there's work that everybody who's at that table has to do. There has to be an openness and willingness from those that have been there for a long time to be encouraging and welcoming and learn about the new folks. And then the new folks have to do a little bit of research and understanding what's going on and showing up prepared.
Exactly. It's both the sides. It's not just uh, sharing wisdom, but the new folks need to put their sleeves up. Absolutely. Uh, I mean, that's the reason I have a follow-up question to you, right? I mean, for the new folks who are coming in. So, do you have any specific tips and advice for young female leaders who want to, I mean, who are actually making strides and making their way into the financial services ecosystem, be it across community banks or credit unions? Do you have any specific advice that you want to share with the younger folks that they should keep in mind, or they might want to reach out to you for mentorship, etc.?
I would, I learned this question in a job interview many, many years
Yeah.
ago. And the person was using it as a selling technique to say, this is why you should come work for us. And their question was, who are you going to learn from? And my takeaway from that was, this is a great question. I need to know if I'm going to advance in my career, not only what I want to learn, but who I'm going to learn it from. And those people can be mentors. They can be role models. So for me, my grandmother was a significant role model, and we can talk about her at some point if we get to it. But she was a role model. I had mentors. I had allies or partners, people
Yeah.
who taught me things. I call them phone-a-friends. So I have a question. Who can I pick up the phone and call that won't make me feel stupid? That will appreciate the question and educate me on something that I don't know.
Yeah.
And so who are those people in your life? Who also are the people that are on your personal board of directors, that when something comes up, who are you going
Yeah.
to reach out to and have a trusted conversation with? And it's important for us to develop those folks in our lives, particularly that trusted board of advisors where you can run things past so that you can go, is this normal? What am I doing that I don't know that I'm doing? Or what am I not doing that I should be doing? Because that outside perspective can really help you grow and grow into the roles that you want to have. But if you're only self-focused and you're not getting some of that feedback, then it's really hard to continue to progress.
I understand absolutely. This is what you talked about is that personal circle of people that you need to have at a speed dial, as simple as that, right? If I need something, who are the people whom I need to look up to and ask for advice. So that's very important. Even I've started creating that, and I have a personal network. So this is not only for female leaders, but I think it's a common advice for everyone, right? You should have that. If you want to grow in your career, if you want to understand what actually matters, because that advice is very core to everyone. So that's a very good one, right?
Well, who's the person that's meant the most to you in your career?
For me, Christy, I would say my father, right? I mean, whenever I take a decision, be it inside the office, outside the office, I mean, even out, I mean, what I do in my daily work, right? So I call up my father and ask him, because he has like tremendous, around 35 years of experience with PNG, and earlier he was in Merck, right? So he's seen the pharmaceutical and FMCG industry for years. So now what I do is very much related to what he did like long time back, so he can provide me very good advices. My father, one, and second, actually my boss here at EXL, right? It's not because of he is my boss at EXL, but I feel very, I would say, connected to him in terms of asking for advice, right? That, Vikas, what do I need to do? I mean, tell me. It might be I'm not able to find new meetings, or if I'm not able to close a deal, or I had a breakup. It doesn't matter, right? I go to him. So that's important. It's very important to have that inner circle. Apart from that, yeah, I mean, I have a few close allies from my school days, my engineering days. Again, that small group of boys group whom I call up and ask, guys, what do I do next? I mean, not the advices are the best always, but they try to be best, right? So that's there.
Well, advice and feedback are kind of like coats in a closet. One of my bosses once told me, you get it and you got to try it on, see if it fits. And sometimes it's okay to give it back or hang it back in the closet if you're using that coat analogy. But it's just great to have those people who will share with you.
It's so important. I think I got to understand this since I was like what 19 or 20, because one thing I figured out, Christy, that it doesn't matter, but if you need to be not even if not I mean not even successful, if you want to move from point A to point B, if you do not know, you have to ask people that how do I go from point A to point B, and you're not your best guide, right? Someone else needs to guide you to do what next steps are. I mean, a, a very big lesson for me. I just want to share with that, Christy. I mean, I'm an engineer, right? I did computer science. I was a software developer like 10 years back, but I didn't like doing that. I wanted to move to something else that made more sense to me, where I can look at top line and bottom line impact, right? So there was someone random at a random. I found out someone for advice, right, as a mentor, and I picked up a random mentor. You won't believe me the amount of impact that person called Sharath, he's based out of Copenhagen, had on my life, right? He told me, Anurag, there's something called analytics that you can actually do. I didn't know jack shit about it, what analytics was. I figured out, and he is again in that small circle. Whenever I need something, I call him up and I tell him that you are the reason because of which I whatever I do today. So these have enormous impact, Christy, and I think my uh, audience would pick these pointers up. If you don't have that close circle, you definitely need to have that close circle. Right? That's really important. Uh, there's a follow-up question to your career, right? I mean, you had a long one, and I want to ask about a few successful initiatives that you might want to share that across your entire career. Are there a few things you're really proud about, and want to talk about a few successful initiatives that you think actually made an impact? The biggest impact till now, Christy, I found that you help people get their home loans, right? That's the biggest impact that I can feel. But apart from that, any specific instance you want to cover?
Well, one thing that kind of stands out across all initiatives is, and there's a book that somebody was sharing with me. It says it's easier to 10x than 2x. And I don't know if that's the exact title of it, but it makes sense, right? It's easier to slay a dragon than a bird sometimes.
Absolutely.
Taking on what seems to be daunting is oftentimes easier and truly more impactful. I can remember at one organization, we decided to rebrand, change our logo, update our website, redo our point of sale system, and our CRM all at the same time. Or in short order, right? They were all done in about an 18-month period, which is also a compressed timeline.
Yes.
And that had a tremendous impact on the entire organization. But one of the things was that it really taught the organization how to do a good job at change management. Because there was so much change going on, they couldn't just leave it to happenstance. And oftentimes, it's easy to get so excited about a project or a thing that you're doing, and you know the why, and you see the vision of what it's going to do, that you forget to bring people along with you. I know at least that can be sometimes my fault, is that I don't always remember to slow down long enough to tell everybody all the steps that I went through to get to where I am, to why I'm excited about something. And I've got to slow down as part of that change management process and really bring everybody along with me, just like I would expect them to do if they were already 6 steps ahead of me. And when you think about creating the kind of impact that we've talked about and the type that your community looks for when they're joining these podcasts, is you've got to really bring folks along with you. And not that we're asking you to slow down or accept less than the best or change your timeline or do any of those things. It's just make sure you build in the space to educate your partners and get your stakeholder feedback.
Absolutely. That's very valuable, Christy. I mean, I have a question for you on your movement to the creative and ecosystem, right? I mean, I know that you spent like more than 20 years with banks, right? Flagster was your longest stint, right? So, what attracted you to come to the credit unions? I mean, what is so special that you thought of moving to the credit union ecosystem and lead lending for one of the biggest credit unions?
The credit union is, they call it a movement. And
Mhm.
it's so very powerful to think about kind of the difference. And one of the differences is when you work for a large publicly traded corporation, you are
Mhm.
on a quarter to quarter cycle. You've got to
Yep.
show the analysts what you're doing. You have to get out in front and talk about it. And there's some things that you're not allowed to share because that's the way the markets work and operate. When you're
Yep.
at a credit unions are owned by the members, the people that we serve on a day-to-day basis, right? They're the ones who elect our board. They're the ones who we're here to serve. And so having them be the ultimate customer,
Yep.
but also the ones who you have to report back to, and are you doing the right things for them? So the focus actually shifts. And it's a lot like patient capital. So if you think about, private equity or venture capital, and you
Yep.
have what I would call regular capital and patient capital. And that
Interact.
regular capital, there's an expectation that you grow at a certain pace. And when you have
True.
patient capital, it's very different, right? The conversations are different. And that's true here at the credit union. The conversations are different. Every conversation is not around how much money we're going to make off of something. There are so many conversations that are around the impact you have in someone's life. And this
Yep.
is not my example, but this was shared recently at a class that I attended. And this credit union was looking at whether or not they should quit doing money orders. Wasn't a huge profit center for them. This was the number of people that did it. And when they looked into it, if they stopped offering it, every person that came through there was going to have to add like an hour bus ride to their day. Who has an extra hour in their day? I know I don't. As part of this workshop, we did the United Way's ALICE program, and ALICE stands
Mhm.
for Asset Limited,
Mhm.
Income Constrained but Employed.
Okay.
So that is, the numbers that the United Way shared was that 56% of people are either in poverty or they're ALICE. And we did this wonderful exercise
Mhm.
where you stepped into the shoes of somebody who was in one of those situations, and you lived a month in their life through this exercise. And the first kind of week that you had seemed fairly easy, like, yeah, you're resilient, you
Yep.
can do it. By the time you got to week 3, even in a simulation, you could really start to feel like how hard it was. And I had
Yes.
2 little kids in my scenario, and luckily I had a good husband. I was the mom in this scenario. I had a good husband who was supportive and had a full-time job, but we only had one car, and we were having to take the bus, and then we were having to go and do these different things. And just trying to get it all done was impossible. So credit unions come at it from this real need to serve the membership and serve the community and make decisions based on that. So the fact that this other credit union, and I'm not taking credit for their story, but
Yep.
it was so powerful that they
Yes.
made the decision to keep a product to save members an hour on the bus. That's the heart and the soul that is the difference of being at a credit union versus being at let's call it a publicly traded organization.
That's easier to say, and I like the analogy. Christy talked about the VC money and the non-VC money, right? So this
Right.
ecosystem is the non-VC money where you are answerable to your members, but not to the VCs. I mean that's a very good example that you took. I mean it's very relevant to even your startups, right? The bootstrap startups versus the startups which are backed by VC money. It's a very good example, and it's great, right? Uh, One last question. I know we are almost on the top of the hour, but I mean I want to be respectful of your time. I want to end this podcast with one generic question, but I want that, right? Because you did wear multiple hats. You've been running lending for years now, right? You understand the lending ecosystem really well. Now with interest rates not coming down right away, it will come down, might be going forward, right? The lending is softer now. It's predicted that it will improve itself, right? The next couple of quarters, but it's all interlinked, right? Cost of funds is not reducing anywhere soon now, right? It's a gradual decrease. So with this ecosystem in place, Christy, plus with, I mean, hate to say, but still, uh, these bunch of neobanks or fintechs, right? Who we are all always competing against for lending. Because if today if I want a personal loan or a auto loan, definitely not a auto loan is a bad example, but still if I want a personal loan, I wouldn't shy away to look at a fintech who's offering me a better rate and a better experience, and it's just a click of a button on an application, right? Versus, I mean, credit unions have their own niches in auto loans, difficult to break them, and I'm proud about it. But as a whole, where do you think is the ecosystem moving towards the end of the year? And I mean, what does 2025 look like in the credit union ecosystem? I mean, what are your plain vanilla predictions?
I think for a lot of individuals,
Yep.
2025, the end of 2024, and the start of 2025 are going to be very challenging. And I'm talking about, just people making ends meet with the cost of food going up. And, I've seen numerous examples of what a real life basket of food costs. I can feel it every time I have to go to the grocery store, and I'm like, wow, a year ago I would have been spending a lot less for the same food. I don't eat any more today than I did. And if you multiply that by a family of four, it starts to get very expensive. And as you
Yep.
see the economy contract, and so people are working less overtime, or maybe one person in a relationship is now having to work part-time, or maybe have gotten laid off, it's
Yep.
going to get a lot more challenging for individuals. And at the same time, while the number of competitors in our space is increasing, you're starting to see credit tightening. And that tends to
Yeah.
happen in a cycle where delinquencies go up, then credit gets tightened, but delinquencies are going up because of these other economic factors. And so I do think we're going to be in a pretty challenging environment for lots of individuals. And when you look at the data, what the data tells us is that it's not just somebody who's living in that ALICE or poverty level that we talked about, that 56% of Americans, but you've got a whole nother level of folks who have good jobs and can pay their bills as long as they're working, but they don't have a lot of reserves. And so if
Yep.
something happens, they're not able to pay their bills. And we're continuously seeing in the data, and I'm not talking about our data specifically because I'm not allowed
Yep.
to, right? We're talking about just data in general. You're
Yep.
starting to see A paper credit have worse delinquencies than some B and C paper credit because people
Yep.
just don't have, they've run through the reserves that they've had, and they have fewer options today. Maybe they're not able to tap their home equity because where else would they go live? Or
Yes.
they live in a place where they're not able to get that equity line of credit. Whatever it is, they're tapped out, and you're starting to see those delinquencies rise. And without a lot of savings, it's going to put folks in a very, very challenging position. And
Yep.
one of the things that we learned through that exercise, that ALICE exercise that we did, was you don't necessarily know where to go to get help and resources. And so I would tell folks that, if you could do one thing to help yourself or people in your community, is figure out today when you don't need them, what resources are available. Because you
Yep.
may not need them, but maybe one of your peers at work needs them. Maybe there's somebody that you know in your neighborhood. And so if you can be that resource, if you can go and find what resources are available in your community, it's really going to be helpful maybe to yourself, but more likely to somebody that's around you. So take the initiative. Be the person in your office that finds those resources and tacks them to the company, water cooler or bulletin board that's in the break room in case
Awesome.
somebody needs those. Be the person who brings an extra lunch, and let folks know that you've popped a couple of single serving, what do microwave meals into the freezer in case somebody didn't have their lunch that day. It's the little things that we can do that can have a great impact on somebody's life.
That sounds very, I would say, fancy, interesting. I mean, I wish we could do those, and I mean, it's great, Christy. So I mean, if you ask me, this episode was much longer than the other ones I've recorded. We all almost on top of 30 minutes, and I still don't want to end it. Right? I think we need to have a episode 2 about specifically talking about lending. Maybe this is really interesting. So again, thanks a lot, Christy, for your time today. We appreciate it. Getting a slot on a Monday is not easy, but you are kind enough to give us that. So thank you for that again.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed both this conversation and the previous ones that we've had, and look forward to connecting again soon.
Absolutely, Christy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.